Jim was probably the most thoughtful person I knew. I don't think he ever forgot an important holiday event. He loved buying flowers. He always gave compliments such as, "You are as beautiful as the first day I met you." Yes, Jim was all of the above to the woman he loved. Unfortunately, the woman Jim loved was his mistress, Stephanie Crowell. I, his wife, Lisa Langley, on the other hand, was more like a servant, keeping his house clean, cooking dinner, and running his errands, even though my work hours were as long as his. It wasn't always like this. In high school and college, I was the girl that many people were looking for. Jim considered himself lucky to have me when we got married. Now I don't think he thinks that way anymore. The legitimate question is, why am I putting up with this? The answer to this question is complex, but mostly has to do with my poor self-esteem, which is a result of the fact that I have gained a lot of weight since marrying Jim. My weight gain was a result of the deaths of my sister and beloved cousin, the bankruptcy of the first company I worked for after college, and Jim's affair with Stephanie, which began when he was unable to provide me with emotional support. While I was gaining weight, he stuck to Stephanie. Between my weight gain, the deaths of my loved ones, and Jim's infidelity, which he didn't try very hard to hide, I was depressed. The only thing that made me happy was that my new job was challenging and financially rewarding, and that seemed to be the only thing keeping me sane. I don't know how long I would have kept this up if it weren't for a chance meeting one Thursday at the grocery store near my office. I was picking up my usual turkey Reuben sandwich when I literally ran into Phil Whitaker. Phil is a guy I knew in high school that I was friends with, although we never actually dated one-on-one. I think he was too shy to ask me out. "Hi, Lisa," he said, staring at me for a few seconds. It took him a while to recognize me because of my weight gain. "Hi, Phil." I smiled forcedly. "I thought you left." "I returned about 6 months ago because of good business opportunities. Do you mind if I join you for lunch once our orders are ready?" "On the contrary, I'll be glad," I answered, this time with a relaxed smile. While Phil ate his roast beef sandwich and I ate my turkey Reuben, we looked at each other for 10 or 15 minutes. Then, after a long pause, Phil looked into my soul and said, "Why are you depressed, and what can I do to help?" I squeezed out a laugh. "I guess you haven't changed since high school in terms of your straightforwardness." "Not at all, I'm trying." "It's a long story and I need to get back to work," I muttered, trying to avoid any unpleasant conversation. "Well, since I'm divorced and have nothing to do tonight, why don't we meet and discuss it? It can't take more than 3 hours, can it?" "Are you serious?" "Like a heart attack. There's no way you would look like this and be 30 pounds overweight if there wasn't a serious problem. And I really care about you and want to help." As I already said, he never minced words. I knew Jim would most likely be with his mistress Stephanie, so I said to myself, "Why not? Where would you like to meet?" "In one of the Planet Fitness franchises that I own. We will choose the one closest to your home. Where do you live?" "I live in the northern suburbs on Delaney Street." "Great. You're probably no more than 2 miles from my establishment on Borden Parkway. Here's a card with an address and a phone number," he said, rummaging through a pile of cards in his inside jacket pocket and pulling out one with the location of Planet Fitness, which, indeed, was only a mile from my house. "See you there at 6:30 p.m. Then, without further ado, he stood up, shook hands, and left. As expected, late in the afternoon, I received a typically cryptic text from Jim saying that he would have to work late, meaning he would be busy with Stephanie, so nothing would stop me from meeting Phil. I got to the Planet Fitness on Borden Parkway around 6:20 and walked up to the front desk, where a well-built young black woman was tending the counter. "Hello," I said. "My name is Lisa Langley. I'm here to see Phil Whitaker." "Oh, hi, Lisa," she smiled. "I'm Amanda. Phil called and said he'll be a few minutes late, but I need to make you feel at home." "Nice," I smiled. "So how do you know Phil?" "We went to high school together. Was he the smartest and most charming guy in school? Like he is now?" With a smile. "Probably so." "Does this place belong to Phil?" "Not only this, he has 2 more in the city center and in the southern suburbs, as well as several other businesses, I'm told. He must be the most successful 28-year-old guy in the whole area. Amanda replied. What is he like as a boss? He's great. He pays above market, treats everyone well, makes sure employee morale is high, but she then giggled. If you screw up, he'll say it to your face, give you one chance to improve, and the second time will fire. I like that in a guy, determined and no nonsense. It seemed that Amanda was completely smitten with Phil. And why not? He was a handsome, successful guy. Amanda and I chatted for another 5 minutes or so. She said hello to the 6 or 7 regulars who had come in during that time, briefly interrupting our conversation. And then Phil walked in. Amanda and the other 2 employees, who I guessed were the physical trainers, had big smiles on their faces. He greeted all 3 with his trademark smile and called them by their full names, then greeted me. Sorry, I'm late. No explanation is required. I cut him off. Okay, then let's go to my office. He turned to Amanda and said, Amanda, please don't let anyone interrupt us unless it's an emergency. Got it, Phil. I got the feeling that Amanda didn't think I was a threat because I was 30-something pounds overweight, so she smiled at me. We went into Phil's office, which had glass walls so anyone could see inside. I'm guessing he wanted his employees to know he wasn't having any illicit meetings. After handing me a bottle of Perrier and making sure I was comfortable, Phil got straight to the point. So, Lisa, come on. For some reason, perhaps because I knew I could trust Phil, and I hadn't been able to relieve myself for months, my whole sad story came out. After just 45 minutes, I recounted my entire pathetic story and cried quietly. He handed me a box of tissues. When I finished, he said, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I know what you need. You need exercise. The endorphins produced by exercise will relieve any malaise or depression, whatever it may be, within a month. Once you're back to your normal weight, with more muscle, you can make a rational decision about what to do next. Do you really think so? I know it. And to hell with your cheating husband. You set a time for your workouts without regard to it. Besides, I suggest you figure out what it takes to get a divorce on the best terms, and you should also immediately separate your finances, Phil snapped. I don't know, I began to answer. Phil didn't like my reserve. Gesturing for me to stay put, he picked up his phone and made a call. Hello, Bert. I'm sorry to bother you at home, but I need you to help my friend. When can you see her, tomorrow or Saturday? I was a little shocked. After Phil had listened for a while, he turned to me and said, Bert is a financial genius and my financial manager. He could meet you tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or any other Saturday morning. His office is about a mile away. What's right for you? Like an automatic machine, I answered. It would be nice tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Great. Phil smiled. Then, talking on the phone, he said, Her name is Lisa Langley. She will be there tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll tell her to take all the financial information she can with her. After Phil and Bert had apparently exchanged a few good-natured jokes, culminating with Phil saying, I'll kick your ass at handball on Saturday if you're brave enough to show up, he interrupted the conversation. Bert, genius. He will help you separate your finances from Jim and invest your money wisely. His first consultation is free, but after that, you will have to negotiate his fee. As soon as he presents his rates, tell him that if he doesn't give you a 50% discount, I will kick his ass. Now let's talk about PI. I'm not sure, I started, but Phil couldn't be stopped. Since I'm not going to charge you for the first 6 months of training, you'll have enough money to use the same PI I used to get everything I was owed from a competitor and my cheating ex-wife. Now here are the details. There seemed to be no way for me to object to what he was dictating. Obviously, he had my life planned out for me. As he briefed me on my training for the next 6 months and arranged to go with me to a meeting with a private investigator the following Monday, although I was able to put it aside. I have to start my fitness class on Saturday and train 5 days a week. He also gave me a nutritional information sheet to improve fitness and combat depression. When we finished, he took me indoors and introduced me to Simona and Gretchen, the trainers who would be working with me. Simona looked like a woman, an African chief, 6 feet of steel muscles, and Gretchen looked like a princess, an 18th century Viking warrior who was even taller and more muscular than Simone. I could tell by their handshakes that they could crush me without breaking a sweat. As I left, I said, "Thank you, Phil." I keep thinking, will I really survive? Damn it, you'll prosper. He smiled. See you on Saturday at your first training session. I'm not usually one to let anyone dictate my life. However, my life was miserable at that point, and I had real confidence in Phil that he could get me back on track, so I decided to just go with the flow for 6 months and then reevaluate. Despite the hell Jim put me through, I felt like I might still love him and wasn't sure about divorce, but decided to see what the future held for me. Bert was very helpful and actually gave me a 50% discount. I met with a private investigator and she told me she would have a report within 3 to 8 weeks. These two things went off without a hitch. Physical fitness, no. Simone on Saturday and Gretchen on Sunday were brutal sadists who would have been great torturers if you lived during the Inquisition. They had smiles on their faces and words of encouragement as they tormented my body during 90-minute workouts both days. I probably would have burst into tears halfway through Sunday's workout if Phil hadn't shown up, smiled at me, told me I was looking better already, and told Gretchen to keep up the good work. After my body was emptied 5 times in the first week, something changed. I was in so much pain when I got home that after a quick dinner, whether Jim was there or not, I would fall into a deep sleep, much better sleep than I had had since my sister died. After the second week, my workouts no longer hurt as much, and I was really excited when I saw that I had lost 8 pounds in just 2 weeks. After 3 weeks, I felt better than I had in a long time and was even more productive than before. Additionally, I no longer focused on the unhappiness in my life and truly began to believe that soon my depression would be a thing of the past. I couldn't bring myself to meet with the private investigator to get the full report, because once I had ironclad evidence of Jim's infidelity, I would have to make a decision. I begged Phil to give me a few more weeks, and he agreed, as he seemed very pleased with my physical progress. Over the next 4 weeks, I lost another 14 pounds and felt more energetic than I had ever felt in my life. I'm down to 139 pounds, and according to Gretchen, I should be able to get back to 130 within 5 to 6 weeks. She said I couldn't get any lower than that because I had more muscle now than when I weighed 127. The new sense of inner energy did bring with it a problem. I was starting to get excited, and I started to lust after Phil. Luckily, by adding yoga to my strength and conditioning routine, I was able to get my thoughts under control. When I finally met with the PI, and Phil at his insistence, for her report 2 months later, she had some very interesting information. Her name is Samantha Price, but she insisted on being called Sam. "Okay, Sam, what do you have?" Phil and I asked at the same time. "Obviously, your husband Jim has never taken Michael Bolton's song, 'When a Man Loves a Woman,' to heart," she giggled, "because he's being played like a sucker." "What exactly?" "As you already know, Jim is having a torrid affair with Stephanie Crowell, and I have photos and videos to prove it. What you don't know is that she's actually deceiving him, cleverly deceiving him, something Jim has no idea about. Jim is obviously convinced that Stephanie loves him and will eventually agree to marry him. However, he's unwilling to leave you and divorce you until she's ready for it, and she slows him down by saying that she's still technically married to a guy she says is Alan Crowell. No such guy exists, and she is not married, but she has a sexual relationship and complicity in crimes with a guy named Warren Bates. Stephanie talked Jim into funding her sham divorce case from Alan Crowell and more, to the tune of approximately $70,000 so far. It was a shock. As far as I knew, he did not receive this money from me, but perhaps I was mistaken. Where did he get this money? From 2 sources. He cashed out his retirement account, paid a fine, and got a second mortgage on your house. Here is a copy of the documents. I suspect your signature there is forged." Sam pushed the papers towards Phil and me. I probably would have cried when I saw my fake signature, which was supposedly notarized, but Phil's curse words brought me out of it. "Rotten son of a bitch," he growled. "What I've told you so far is mostly the bad part," Sam said. Now the good part, and why I mentioned the Michael Bolton song. Like the song says, she's bad, but he doesn't see it, and he gets really mad at his good friend who warned him about Stephanie and told him to check if she was playing with him. "Who are we talking about?" I asked. "Do you know Will Lamsona?" I wondered why I hadn't heard from or seen Will for the last couple of months. He used to come to us often and was friends with Jim. Now Stephanie's plan is to take another $50,000 or so from him while she and Bates work on another bank scam. Then she Warren the Bates are going to run away, Sam continued. How is she going to get another $50,000? In the latest audio recording of their conversation we have, Jim seems a little reluctant to agree to this. But I'm sure that with better sex she can get him to fake a loan request or somehow take advantage of savings and jewelry stored in the safe, Sam continued. Luckily, Bert had already completely separated our finances, and I had already transferred everything from our joint safe deposit box to one of my own safe deposit boxes at another bank that Jim doesn't know about. So, without outright fraud, Jim won't be able to pull this off. However, his actions showed that he is capable of any fraud. Then a wide smile appeared on Sam's face. So, as the song says, to paraphrase, she will bring him a lot of suffering because she is taking him for a fool, and he will be the last one to know. So what should I do? Phil took control. Bring this information to Jim's attention. Tell him that if he doesn't correct the situation immediately, you will arrest him and those who helped him fake second mortgage for fraud. Then, let's look at his reaction. Sam added, I like this idea. My uncle, Fred Morton, is a police department fraud detective who I can ask for help if it comes down to it. I wasn't quite sure if I was ready for confrontation. I'd been avoiding it for almost 2 years. But then Phil said, let me take you to dinner and we can talk about it. Phil actually invited me to dinner at a nice restaurant. He was the perfect gentleman except for one thing. He didn't let me order and ordered my food himself. I started to protest, but he said, you're making good progress, and I don't want to see any backsliding. I make it my personal mission to get you to 130 in 6 weeks. The twinkle in his eye when he said this made me believe that Phil was helping me out, of more than just the kindness of his heart. That perhaps he had a sexual interest in me. I trembled with anticipation as I thought about it, and then put it out of my mind. During dinner and on the way to my car, Phil convinced me to quickly meet Jim. He offered to accompany me, but I refused. I told him that I needed a few days to gather my courage, but I would do it. On Friday night, when it was unusual for Jim to be home, we were finishing dinner. I told him, we need to talk tomorrow morning. I can't, he said, stuffing his mouth with the last piece of pork chop. I have to leave at least from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Stephanie can wait, I growled, revealing to him for the first time that I knew his lover's name. You will either hear me at this table tomorrow at 9 o'clock, or I will call Detective Morton from the fraud squad. I don't think I've ever seen someone's face go completely colorless before. He swallowed the rest of the food, otherwise he might have choked. I could talk to him in the evening, but I wanted him to have trouble sleeping at night. Oh, are you talking about? He stammered, unable to form a reasonable sentence. Also, clear the table and put the dishes in the dishwasher. I had a hard workout this afternoon and I'm too tired. Finally, today you will sleep in the guest room, I giggled. You can't tell me what to do, he said when his courage seemed to have returned. I just told you, and if you don't want our conversation tomorrow to go off the rails, you will do as you're told, I snapped, looking down at him. I slept well. Jim must have not gotten enough sleep, because the next morning when I sat down with him at the kitchen table, he had bags under his eyes. He put the dishes in the dishwasher. So what's up? He asked, nervously. I growled. It's about your affair with Stephanie Crowell, and how she and her fucking buddy Warren Bates are playing a prank on you, and how you forged my signature on the mortgage document and gave the money to the bitch. That's what it's about. I then deliberately, abruptly placed in front of him, in order, photographs of his indiscretion, a statement of withdrawal from his retirement account, a photograph of Stephanie and Bates kissing, and a document on a second mortgage with my forged signature. As a finishing touch, I then played back for him a portion of the conversation that Sam had recorded between Stephanie and Bates, where they talked about fleecing him out of another $50,000 and then running away after their bank scam was over. I thought Jim made faint, but somehow he kept himself under control. After looking between the documents on the table out into space and at me for a good 10 minutes, he finally spoke. I do not know what to say. Of course, you have nothing to say. However, what you will do is call Detective Morton yourself, I said, placing Morton's business card on top of the documents on the table. To tell him the whole story and work with him to get the love of your life thrown in prison. If you do this, you can probably make a deal to avoid going to jail for forging my signature. If not, I'll do it myself. I'll put forward charges against you. Stephanie is not the love of my life. You are, he began to say. To his displeasure, his lie was interrupted by my laughter. When I regained my composure, I said, "Do you really think I'm stupid enough to believe that, considering how you've treated me for the last 2 years? I'm giving you until 5 p.m. Monday to call Morton. After this, I'll call him, and you won't like it." I got up to leave for training, but I just couldn't help it. So before leaving, I said, "Hey, Siri, play When a Man Loves a Woman." As I walked out the door with my gym bag, I heard, "She can bring him such suffering if she takes him for a fool. He's the last one to know." I wondered if those words had gotten through to Jim. Jim got really lucky when he talked to the cops. Even though I told Jim he could get probation, I didn't really believe it. But it turns out that the other scam that Crowell and Bates pulled was really serious, so the cops were really out to get them. Over the next 6 weeks, with Jim's help, the cops actually tracked down Crowell and Bates and, by raiding their apartment, were able to obtain incriminating evidence about a high-profile bank scam. Thus, after pleading guilty to 1 count of second mortgage fraud, Jim was given 2 years probation for his cooperation and agreement to testify against Crowell and Bates. As I had expected and planned with the divorce lawyer Phil had set me up with, pleading guilty to the charge of adultery made my divorce from Jim the right decision. He was not successful in dividing the assets because apparently family law judges do not take kindly to husbands who cheat on their wives by having an affair. All of the money Jim received as a result of our breakup was used to pay off the fraudulent second mortgage, and the approximately $10,000 he was short on was covered by the prosecutor with some of the money seized from Crowell and Bates. I received almost all the proceeds from the sale of our house, minus the amount of the first mortgage. And together with the money that I kept separately from Jim, my finances were fine, and I immediately rented an apartment near the city center. Because I had a lot going on with work, my divorce, and the lawsuit against Crowell and Bates, it took me almost 2 months from my first dinner with Phil before I was down to 130 pounds. But the extra time was worth it. During this time, my ego was constantly inflated by the stares I received during my 90-minute exercise sessions and how often I was accosted while doing even mundane tasks, like shopping or walking in the park. Horny men paid extra attention to me, not only because I now had a body that was even better than when I was 21, but also because of the confidence I exuded and the constant smile on my face. The only downside was that Phil seemed annoyed by the extra attention on me. He seemed hesitant to get close to me because of my newfound confidence. However, I had plans for him. When my quickie divorce was almost complete, I walked into Phil's office wearing my skimpiest workout clothes soaked with sweat. His eyes became as big as saucers. He was talking on the phone, but quickly disconnected. "Sorry to bother you, Phil," I said, "but I hope you can come to my house for a dinner party this Saturday night. You have been a great help to me, and I want you to know that I appreciate it." Of course, Lisa. At what time?" "How about 6:30? Here's my address," I continued, handing him a piece of paper. "What should I bring?" "Nothing but your appetites," I smiled as I walked out, wondering if he would understand the plural of appetites. Phil seemed surprised that he was the only guest at the dinner party. He seemed even more surprised when he couldn't smell anything cooking. I don't know if it was surprise or lust on his face when he saw my skimpy outfit. After a casual greeting,